Everybody understands when you wave the white flag, you want to be friends?
The War of the Worlds.
All right, Tig,
Eric.
you have just watched The Near Destruction of the World with 1953's The War of the Worlds, an adaptation of H.G. Wells' legendary classic 1898 book of the same name. That's right, 1898, folks. H.G. Wells wrote The War of the Worlds. Remarkable when you actually think about it, how far ahead of its time this really was, and influenced so many other stories, which of course we will get into. So The War of the Worlds is probably H.G. Wells' best known works. Of course, it's been adapted many times. One of the modern, more famous ones is the Steven Spielberg's 2005 adaptation starring Tom Cruise. Most recently, there were two different British television series adapting it, both done in 2019. There was one called The Great Martian War, made in 2013, and a bunch of other stuff. The Orson Welles radio play is maybe the best known adaptation of this. This was a 1938 broadcast that, as legend has it, people believed was real. Orson Welles played it as if it was actually happening, and people thought there really was a Martian invasion, and it caused widespread panic and so on. That is kind of inflated mythology. It's not quite what it's now seen. Like, it didn't quite happen that way, but it's a fun tale nonetheless. That is all just some background, though, to lead us to this, which is the first feature film adaptation of The War of the Worlds, made in 1953. And it changes a bunch from the book. It sets it in the modern day, of course. It's a little more, just like with Them and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, you very much have that post-war World War II vibe going on. So it's playing into that a little bit. All that is a very long preamble to me asking, Tig, what did you think of the movie? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, because my first time watching it, I thought it was great. I can't believe how violent it was. Not like gory violent, just destruction, just ongoing destruction for like an hour of the movie.
Everybody understands when you wave the white flag, you want to be friends?
That is, I think, one of the most striking things about it to me. And one of the things that's always stuck with me is how bleak the movie is, especially in that last third. The protagonist is running through the streets of Los Angeles looking for Sylvia. And the streets are empty, which anytime you see empty streets in a movie, that's like that's always super cool. Like 28 Days Later, right? That's the best part of the movie. Stuff like that is always cool. But the bit that's always struck with me is like, hear the explosions and the lasers and things being destroyed all over the place, and then you get the sound of these people locked up in a church singing, knowing that the world is basically ending around them. These people are basically like, this is the end of the world, we're all dying, so we're going to gather up in this place and just sort of die together. And even as someone who is not a religious person, that's always really just sort of hit me as like a really kind of heavy image. That whole thing, bleaker than you'd expect from a 1950s flick.
And especially, and not to jump too far, well, I'm going to be jumping ahead to the end basically, but even just the way it ended, they didn't figure anything out. We just got lucky.
Yeah.
Like, it was that kind of thing. So that made it feel even more bleak, because we were dead. It was over. So that just made it more bleak to me, was that they were just stopped by chance.
The Martians had no resistance to the bacteria in our atmosphere, to which we have long since become immune. All over the world, their machines began to stop and fall.
During the Cold War era, especially during the 50s, you got sort of two sides of the science thing. And one was always kind of the triumph of science and how mankind through science could triumph over everything. And then there was also the fear of science run amok, science gone mad. That was Them, which we did a few episodes back. This was neither. One of the major changes with this is a visual change. So there's a nod to it in that, for the most part, the classic Martians are like these guys, they're tripods.
Oh, okay.
So in Wells' work and in all the other adaptations, you're seeing tripods. You're seeing these big, these big giant tripod walkers walking around and destroying everything. And here in this movie, rather than tripods, and it makes sense, we talked about this in a previous episode too, UFOs, flying saucers were a big thing at the time. This was the dawn of flying saucers, so it kind of makes sense that they made these a little more flying saucery. So yeah, this is your first time viewing it. So yeah, what thoughts do you have on this thing?
I like I was saying before, like I was shocked on the destruction of everything and how bleak it was. I liked how it started because I liked that the people when they first see it come down, it's more like everyone's just like, oh yeah, like there's a fat cop like or whatever he is like banging on it. Well, I'm gonna go in there and just start banging on it. And
it'll be a real good attraction for Sunday drivers.
Better than a lion farm or a snake pit.
just the way everybody was so nonchalant about it in the beginning, looking to make money off it.
It was totally that whole small town Americana thing. Like, well, we ain't got nothing better to do tonight. Let's all gather around the weird thing outside of town.
The part where they're in this, when things are starting to fall apart and people are like attacking each other, trying to steal stuff off the truck and stuff. That part I was shocked about too, because society just has crumbled because of what's going on, and everybody's just, I thought that part was pretty intense actually for an old movie at least.
And I like the during that whole scene, there's the one guy who's got the suitcase filled with money, and he's trying to bribe people. And they're like, money doesn't mean anything anymore.
I'll make it 1,000. Money's no good anymore, man.
I appreciate the special effects of the era.
The sound effects, I liked all the sound effects. The only one thing I would say that was cheesy, but it's the 50s, was the actual aliens. But other than that, like you don't really see them that often. Though there is that cool scene where the woman sees one. They're held up in the house, and she like the guy goes look away, and she looks through the window, and she briefly sees it like walk by, and she's like, "Oh my god!" And then she tries to tell him, and he's like, "Where? I don't see anything." That was a cool scene.
Something moved out there.
There's nothing there now.
And it was just like this fleeting glimpse that you see too.
Yeah, which I said reminds me of like that scene on the news in Signs when they see that brief.
And also with the aliens, I really loved the effect on the alien's arm at the end when it dies and the arm's dangling out, and that kind of breathing effect. Even as a kid, when I saw this, when I was young, special effects hadn't gotten to the point yet where this looked really archaic and dated. Because the UFOs all look cool, the alien craft looks cool. Like you said, all the explosions and the destruction, are good. You're seeing some buildings getting blown up, and it's all, it all I think still holds up pretty well.
To mention one of the other scenes that sticks out in my head is when the spacecraft crashes into the farmhouse.
Yeah, like character-wise, it falls prey to a lot of the typical stuff from the era. I mean, the protagonist is just sort of your generic, I'm a tough American guy protagonist, but he happens to be a scientist. And the female protagonist is just generic hysterical woman.
There was one of the scenes, and that you've mentioned, when she just starts screaming, like, and he's just shaking her and hugging her.
Yeah, we've touched on that a couple of times before. Yeah, like compared to a couple of the other science fiction flicks from the era that we've watched for this show, like Them and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the characters are a little more two-dimensional here than they are there. This really isn't a character-driven movie whatsoever. There's not a lot of depth to these characters. But like you said, you're not really watching this for the characters. You're watching for the Martians. But even though it's a slightly slower bit, there's that kind of build up to like, oh, they're going to nuke the things, and how that's going to, how's that going to go? I
loved that too, because, their tension of like, like we might have to use a nuke, like we might just have to do it. And it was over, like it was over a town in California, right, or something. What?
Yeah.
And then they do it, and nothing, like literally nothing happens.
Yeah, throughout the whole thing, the whole buildup is basically that, oh, it's hopeless. Like everything is hopeless. Everything they try is going to be hopeless. Everything is just completely hopeless. But yeah, like there's like some Cold War commentary that you can read into it there, feeling out what it would feel to be completely powerless against forces much not only just forces more powerful than us, but they make it a point to say in the beginning how much more intelligent they are than us and all that. So this is just something that's completely beyond us, and I think that is what made it appropriate to bring in sort of the church stuff near the end, is because human beings encounter these creatures that are so much more beyond us that they're almost sort of godlike in some ways. Yeah, that kind of can screw with a human being's sense of our place in the universe.
Not only were they gonna kill us all off, but they were taking the planet. Like we were in charge. Like this is our planet, and in a way, like humans are in charge. We're the smart ones. We got the big brains, so we're protecting the planet, and we were losing the entire planet. It's like, sorry, we lost the planet.
Yeah, in days too.
Yeah.
Now consider that, or the story written in 1898, this movie in 1953. Think about how many other stories, both movies and novels and so on, owe a debt to this. I mean, there's so many at this point. I mean,
It's ridiculous. As
obvious ones like
talking,
Independence Day.
like even Signs.
Yeah.
Signs is basically the same. That's what it is. It's the same story, basically.
Tons of them. Like basically every alien invasion story ever owes itself to this.
What we watched with John Goodman.
You know what? I didn't even think of that one. But Jesus, yeah, you're right. Like the last 10 or 15 minutes of 10 Cloverfield Lane is kind of like the opening salvo of the War of the Worlds. Like stuff like that. The fact that it can still resonate today speaks volumes.
Yeah, and the fact that they just keep remaking it over and over and over in TV form and in movies and stuff.
Do you have any other thoughts actually before
let me see here. One, I really liked the camera experiment. I liked when they hooked up the eye from the ship that they got. And the last thing was the flying wing. That was pretty cool that there was like all this footage of the flying wing, which was like, I remember reading about that and how it was destroyed. There's no more left. You can't even like find them and stuff. So that was kind of cool.
Footage.
Yeah, actually like legit footage of it flying around. I thought that was cool.
Little historical artifacts.
Yeah. The only thing I wrote down that drove me nuts was when they were unscrewing the top to get out, when the alien was getting out. That scene lasted forever.
It's a bomb. Bombs don't unscrew.
It's no meteor, that's for sure.
So the 2005 adaptation with Spielberg and Tom Cruise is a little divisive. There are some people who really look down on it and they think it's just kind of a mess. I disagree. I think it's one of the great destruction movies. And if you like movies that's just about like really bleak destruction, Spielberg's action directing and destruction directing in that is some of the best that he's ever done. The other one that I recommend is the 2019 3-part miniseries adaptation by the BBC, starring Eleanor Tomlinson. 3 parts, each episode is a little under an hour, so it's basically just the length of a long movie. It's set during Edwardian England, so it's a period piece.
Oh, that's cool.
Really cool. I love the fact that it's a period piece because you get to see these high-tech aliens destroying like early 1900s England, and that's awesome.
That's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, that one is really good. There's the other 2019 television series, which is now in season 2. I absolutely do not. It's set in the modern day. I absolutely do not recommend it whatsoever. It's terrible. Nobody should watch that. Don't waste any of your time. It's terrible, and don't do that. And then finally, this is not the War of the Worlds. It might remind some people of it just because it involves aliens and tripods coming down and taking over the Earth. Is John Christopher's Tripods trilogy, which starts with The White Mountains and continues with The City of Golden Lead, and finishes with The Pool of Fire. These books were a favorite of mine as a kid, and I've read them, 4, 5, 6 times since then, well into adulthood. Aliens and tripods come down, they take over the world, they enslave humanity, and that's where the story opens. Humanity is already enslaved when the first book begins. And so it's about living, basically it's like after War of the Worlds. It's about living under their rule. I'm glad you enjoyed watching this one. I've always been a fan. It was fun to revisit again. As I mentioned to you when I gave this to you, this is now the 4th in a row that I like adaptation I've watched in the last 2 weeks or so. I've just been, for some reason, on a World of Worlds kick. So it was fun to basically go backwards. That's how I did it. I went backwards in when they were produced. So maybe I'll listen to the Orson Welles radio podcast.
Yeah, I'm glad I finally got to say it. So
that means it's my turn.
So, Eric, you will be watching for the first time a movie I liked as a teen. It's from 1991. It's an action drama starring Sean Astin, Will Wheaton, and Keith Coogan called Toy Soldiers.
The Regis School for Boys, where the country's best families
Hey, bring that back here.
send the world's worst students. But these boys are in for a real shock.
If you do not produce my father unharmed, I will begin executing the hostages.
My boys, many of them, they have a real problem with authority.
Are you with me or not?
Of course we're with you.
We're really gonna do this? You bet.
Toy Soldiers.
Oh, okay. I'm familiar with this, but yeah, I've seen it.
I am Tig, and that's Eric. And thanks for hanging out at the movie club. That's our new jingle.
Bing.